No, I think we
That's
ought to
over
have it.
here.
Yeah,
Leslie.
I will.
Are we on? Yeah. Well, I'm calling to order the July meeting of the Glendale Planning and Historic Preservation Commission. I understand we're online. Excuse me. We started. We started the meeting. And we're online. We're live. Leslie, are you available online?
Yes, Leslie's here.
Leslie, Beth, are you also available?
Yes, until 6.
I think even with your absence at 6, we'll have a quorum. So let's begin with our meeting. We begin as always with the review and the approval of the minutes of our last meeting. Whenever the commission has had a chance to review this, with pleasure.
I'll
I'm
move to accept them.
Sorry to interrupt. Tom, if you could lean more into the microphone, we're having trouble hearing you on Zoom. Thank you.
Is that better, David? Okay. I don't think it was
Much
on. Okay. So we have a motion by Randy to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion of those minutes? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, just to point out, the members who are here by Zoom do in fact count for the quorum, and their votes do count.
Absolutely.
This will be the last meeting where that
Oh.
is the case, but
Thank
that
goodness.
is-
All live after this, huh?
what's that?
No more hybrid meetings after this?
No more virtual meetings. We'll go back to being present. You can, as you always could, attend by, virtual and even speak, but you couldn't vote and you wouldn't count as the quorum.
Okay. All very
That
good.
will be on Thursday when that happens.
All right. Well, I look forward to getting back to normal. Thanks for that information, Mayor. Moving on to our business, we have one old business. That's the request of Greg Dahman for porch material change at 1075 Willow. Is Mr. Dahman here? All right. I don't believe we saw you last month. We had your. No, that's okay. We had your contractor and he served you well. We've all had an opportunity to review your revised application materials, so you can say as little or as much as you want, and we'll take it from there.
The only thing I was going to say was, after watching the last meeting, we've simplified the project greatly, so we aren't looking to extend the porch, replace the roof, or do the carport. So it's literally just existing structure, pop off the old wood that's kind of rotting away, and then replace with Trex, which is the same little bit of
Okay. And that's the front porch, the front steps, the side steps, and the rear steps. Is that my correct understanding?
correct. And the back door has just like kind of 2x4 lumber steps right now, so we would make steps that look kind of like the other side steps, basically.
Okay. All right. Members of the commission, you've had an opportunity to review the application, hear the applicant. Any questions?
I
comments,
do have a
discussion? Yes.
question. Are you putting railings on the porch, on the front porch? Well, I think the building inspector is going to require you to, because it's higher than 18 inches. At least it looks like it in the picture. I didn't go measure it.
We
So
could put railings.
if he requires railings, you're probably going to want to handle that in this meeting so you don't have to get delayed another month, because we need to review that also. So I assume that you'd want the railings to match the railing going down the steps.
It would be white Trex railing the whole way around.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he's going to require it.
Yeah. He probably
That
said
Mr. Corus is correct. Yes, railings would be required.
Okay. So then, yeah, we would like that.
Okay. All right.
All right. Anyone else? Is there a motion?
I move that we accept the proposal as submitted with the addition of the railings around the porch.
Okay.
I
Very
would
good.
second that.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Members of the commission? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to new business, we have one request, and that's of Ryan Sweeney at 225 Magnolia. Is Mr. Sweeney available? David,
Mr.
have you
Sweeney,
heard from him?
Yeah, he indicated he
David.
would, sorry, he indicated he would be joining by Zoom. I have yet to see him in the meeting here. So I will, I'll notify when he does come up.
Okay, well, let's pass him for now, pass on that request and put it to the end of our meeting. But please do keep us posted, David, of Mr. Sweeney's attendance. The next order of business is authorization for me to sign the Planning Commission's resolution recommending approval of the conversion of 42 Washington Avenue for assisted living. I think everybody here is familiar with that project, and you realize we took a vote last month recommending approval. It was a 5-2 vote, I believe. You've all had a chance to review the draft of the resolution. That's in the normal course of business. You will authorize me to sign that resolution, and I'll sign tonight and pass it on to the council, and they'll schedule it from here.
And this is approval for conditional use, not approval totally.
Correct. It's just the conditional use. Assuming it passes with the council, the applicant will have to come back to us for a certificate of appropriateness for the actual construction, design and construction.
Right.
Members of the commission, you've heard, or you've had a chance to review that resolution. Is there a motion authorizing me to sign?
So moved.
I'll second it. All right, motion second. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Mayor Lofty abstains.
Very good.
Mr. Bridenstine, I'd like to point out that
Yes.
Ms. Cooper appears to have voted nay.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooper voted nay based on
Okay.
Zoom.
Okay, we'll make a note of that for the minutes. All right, and David, the final version of that resolution is somewhere in this room for my signature?
In the excitement of today, I did not get a clean copy of that printed. I apologize. One will be ready for you tomorrow at the village office.
Okay. All right, well, I can do that, and I can also sign the draft version. The page that has my signature is not watermarked with draft, so I'll leave that with the mayor.
That was intentional.
Okay. All right, well, let's continue on with our action items. The next is the introduction of proposed revisions to the Glendale zoning code pertaining to residential and commercial signage. That sounds like a mouthful for something that we're really not going to act upon today in any great substance. By way of background, I'd like for members of the commission should realize this, but for members of the public, you should realize that in 2015, I think it was, the U.S. Supreme Court came down with a decision called Reed versus Town of Gilbert. And that was a decision relative to signs and zoning codes. The short version of that case was that the court held that sign codes must be what they called content neutral. So in other words, the sign code had to be drafted in such a way that you can't look at the sign and characterize the sign as a real estate sign or a political sign or a Wendy sign in order to figure out what regulations apply. It had to be content neutral. The regulations have to be totally devoid of any reference to what the sign actually says. The court was very clear that we have the ability to regulate the size, the height, the lighting, the materials, and so forth. But the ruling from the court was it had to be content neutral. So we over the course of those years, we took a look at our code with our council, with the members of our own commission, and concluded that we needed to take a second look, a closer look at the sign code as it existed. And that was a process that was begun in 2018, 2019, perhaps, certainly not of early vintage. And in that process, I appointed an ad hoc committee consisting of myself, Dan Mazum, and Beth Sullibarger. So with the assistance of our counsel and David Lumsden, we've drafted a replacement sign code for our zoning code. I have copies here today, and I think David will post those online as well. The next part of the process, though, because this entails an actual amendment to our zoning code, is for us to hold a public hearing, hear from the public, hear comments amongst ourselves, and then make a recommendation to the village council on the sign code. It's my recommendation that we hold the public hearing at our meeting in August. I almost said next month, but it is our next meeting, whatever the first Monday is in August. And then that will begin our formal process of evaluating the sign code. Of course, everybody will have an opportunity to review the draft from this day going forward. Not just everybody here at the panel, but members of the public. And then, of course, the public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to hear from the public. So any questions before I ask for a motion to schedule that public hearing? All right. One final point I wanted to make clear that this whole effort relative to the sign code is not in response to any recent signs that we've seen around the village of any nature. This was clearly in response to the Supreme Court's decision in Reed versus Town of Gilbert. It's our obligation based on the Supreme Court decision, and again, it's not reactionary to any form of signs that we've seen in the village over the last how many years. So seeing no further discussion, I'd ask for a motion that we schedule this for a public hearing in August, the first Monday in August at a regular meeting.
That'll be August 2nd.
August 2nd.
So moved.
So moved. Motion is second. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. David, it falls to you now. You know how to publish the ads and get the ball rolling.
Yes, legal ads will be published in the next week or so to give folks advance notice of the meeting. Those legal notices will be distributed through our usual channels and will include information on how to view the current draft of the signage code for all members of the public who are interested in reviewing that before the public hearing. So that'll get posted on our website and more information will become available in the next week or so.
Thanks for that, David. I should point out, and I neglected to earlier, I have a stack of the early draft of the sign code as drafted by the committee. If anybody here in the audience wishes to have a print copy, it's available, or you can certainly wait until it's published online and get that as well. All right, staying with our agenda then. Next is the discussion of possible alterations requiring setbacks for driveways within the historic district. I'll turn the mic over to Tom Kerr, who's sort of a committee of one. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't have said that. I retracted immediately. So Beth and Tom have been working very diligently on this issue, and I'll turn it over to Tom to explain his efforts.
Sent out the updated markup of the proposed talk, taking into consideration the comments from our, I think it's our March 29th meeting where the members expressed a number of points, and I tried to include all those in. And since then, so I came up
Tom,
with this
could you talk a little closer to your mic, please?
So I revised the proposed ordinance, and just to bring everybody up to speed, what the purpose of this, a few years back, we changed 154.46E2 that required at least a 5-foot setback from the adjoining property line for any drives or walkways. And the unintended consequences resulted in homes in districts A, B, and C where a setback of 5 feet from an adjoining property line would not accommodate a usable driveway. In other words, they would not have access, paved access to their rear yards. So the purpose of this is to come together with an exception to that ordinance, which accommodates A, B, and C district homes so that they could have a paved driveway. And that's the purpose. And it talks about placement of the driveway and using a ribbon driveway, which are 2 strips of concrete separated by a pervious surface such as grass or gravel in the middle, or it could be, with this new revision, all gravel the whole width if they so chose. And so that's the purpose of this addition to that section. So, and I know, Randy, you mentioned you had one point you wanted to bring that I missed. We didn't talk about. So, would you like to bring that up?
We have part of our code, and both Tom and I have lived this, which is if your house predated our zoning, and you encroach on the setbacks with your house, you could continue to move forward and expand the house as long as you didn't increase the encroachment. And I believe we ought to have some type of wording in here about that relative to folks that already have driveways, so they don't get caught up of, I want to repave my driveway, and we say, well, you're encroaching, so you can't. So that would be the purpose.
Okay. Okay. Did anybody else have any additional revisions for this rev?
Have you dealt with danger to the neighbors' trees or landscaping?
No, because I believe we've had a court ruling where the land from your property line, you can cut down, straight down or straight up as much as you want.
As long as it doesn't kill the tree.
And I don't think with driveways, with a gravel driveway, I mean, they don't go.
Gravel
that deep.
driveway wouldn't be a problem, but if you're putting in concrete, you're going to have an 8-inch base most likely, and then 4 inches of concrete on top of that. You're going down 12 inches.
Okay.
If it's not a tree with tap roots, you're cutting off half the roots.
Yeah. I don't know how we can legislate that, frankly.
Well, I
Is
think
that-
we could say that if the adjoining neighbor's tree is in danger, you could have a gravel driveway, but you couldn't have concrete.
Do you have any example? I mean, do you know of any other village or ordinances around the country that has any of that
I
kind of
haven't
language?
researched that. I did look into the tree issue,
Mhm.
and you can cut the limbs above, but you can't even do that if it's gonna kill the tree. In other words, if the neighbor's tree is going over like this towards your property, you can't just cut the whole thing off and just leave a stump there.
Oh, I understood you could, but I haven't reviewed the specific law.
Yeah, you can't kill the tree. You can trim, but you can't trim excessively.
Would you like to join the committee and come up with some proposed language for before next month?
Well, I just think that when you get that close, first of all, when I looked at your examples, if there's a fence there, you can't open the door. If there's that passenger door or the driver's
Right.
door.
Oh, this is definitely an exception to, it's based strictly access to the backyard.
Yeah.
For example, the ones where the setback in the zone where you only have a 7-foot setback, obviously the
6
driveway is going
inches
to
on
be
each
7
side, yeah.
foot wide, so you're not going to be parking there and getting out anyway.
Yeah.
With the 10-foot setback, if you squeeze out, you might get out,
But is it okay to have a 0 setback and have people opening the passenger door and walking out onto their neighbor's flower beds?
Well, that's another issue, and this accommodates use of people's first property, their property rights. So I guess if the neighbor didn't like that, they could put a fence up, keep them from getting out on their grass. But this is another situation. Can we legislate all these specific details?
I just think it's something that needs to be raised before we create the situation.
Again, can you come up with something for that too? You want to look into that? I mean, frankly, I don't see how we can put anything in legal language that would restrict the use of your property just based on a potential getting out of a car on somebody else's grass or land.
Maybe that's why we don't have 0 setbacks.
Yeah. All right.
This is Beth Sullerberger. I'd just like to thank Tom Kerr for all the work that he's done on this, and also express support for the suggestions that Bob Corus has made just now. I think he makes a good point on both accounts, and I personally have a gravel driveway because I have 2 mature trees that I think would be jeopardized by paving my driveway. So I hope that we can come up with language for this.
Well, that you just made a statement that I could write that if there's a potential to endanger trees, only gravel or pervious surface would be allowed.
Mhm.
Does that
Yeah,
meet it?
that'd be good.
All right, well.
Okay,
that's Good
that,
committee.
that sounds good. And just in general, I am concerned about water runoff and diminishing pervious surfaces when we approve paving of driveways.
Beth, that was one of the concerns we talked about last time. Did you see in there where we said that I think Bob brought up the slope of or Dan did, one of the slope of the driveway would be toward the pervious center surface to prevent runoff or to ensure water runoff is captured on the owner's property, that it wouldn't be channeled to the neighbor's property. Does
point.
that meet that need, or was there something else?
Well, I think that the concrete strips are a very good way of addressing this problem with stormwater runoff in general. And I think sloping those strips toward the center was a great suggestion on the part of Dan.
So does that address your concern?
What about if it's all concrete?
Well, this is just an exception in these zones where if you cannot meet the 5-foot setback, so only in these zones, you wouldn't have a solid concrete. You can only do the ribbon
Okay.
or the impervious gravel
good.
or pervious gravel. So this is just an exception. Anywhere else where you have the 15-foot setback, where you have enough land to have the 5-foot setback, this would not change that at all.
Okay.
This has nothing to do with that at all. So we'll keep the base intent of the ordinance, but we'll make an exception where that ordinance would not allow access to your rear yard with a driveway. So. All right. Well, are there any other comments? Do I need to?
Well, just let me remind everyone that this is a proposed amendment to our zoning code. So this is really the very start of it, even though you've been working on it a long time and done some great work, Tom. This is like the very start where I believe the planning commission would have to submit a proposed zoning change to the clerk, to the village clerk, who would then send it back, and there would be public hearing and, you know, all the steps that a zoning amendment requires. So it's a great start.
Yeah. And as we discussed a few months ago, once we get the language, we'll give it to David and have the village solicitor review it and make sure the language is appropriate before we even come back to.
Right.
To send it to
The other
council.
thing that I have to just ask is, and I'll want our solicitor to look at it, is whether controlling water runoff is something appropriate for the planning commission to be dealing with. I mean, I get that this is a problem for somebody who has a those houses close to their neighbor's house, and putting in a driveway might be a problem for it. But then to go and so dealing with the setbacks is perfectly good way of addressing that. But then to raise the question of, well, how do we handle water runoff? We should have ribbon driveways and that, and they slant in. That might, I don't know, that might be beyond what the planning commission is supposed to be doing.
It might be beyond planning commission, but it is code that you not direct water to your neighbor's property.
Absolutely, absolutely it is. And if you had a situation where that was a concern, then there are other ways of handling it though too. You could slope the whole driveway in towards your property and channel it in a side swale or something.
Well, that's a good point, and I'd be interested to hear what the solicitor says. But if it is a ribbon driveway, and because it's going to be additionally so close to the owner's home, we don't want the water to be sloped toward the owner's foundation either. So that's why both should be sloped to the middle. It's to help the owner out and the neighbor. But if we can do that, that's the
Yeah. No, I just want to keep, flag that issue, put it on the table, and we can sort it out as the process goes along.
Okay, thank you. Is that it for?
Yeah.
All right, I'll type this up and make the additions and issue it out for review, and we can discuss it next meeting.
So this would then be come to the planning commission as a suggested amendment to the zoning code, which would then initiate the procedure for amending the zoning code.
Correct. Go ahead, David.
My recommendation would be, Mr. Kerr, when you have a final version with all of these changes built in, you, I, and any other planning commission members who wish to be a part of, I'll call it an ad hoc committee, much like we had for signage, can have a conversation with the solicitor to make sure that all of the parts of this work. And then it would follow the same pathway that the signage code amendments are following, where we would bring it back to planning, have a motion for a public hearing, and go from there.
Right. And David, on that point, correct me if I'm wrong, but the planning commission is authorized to initiate the zoning text amendment process as well, correct?
That's correct. Our zoning code has 3 ways for amendment. Council can introduce an amendment, planning commission can introduce an amendment, and they may be introduced by members of the public by petition. So this would fall under the planning commission method, which would follow a introduction and motion for a public hearing, and then ultimately a recommendation to council to either, I would assume, only adopt any suggested zoning code amendments.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that as Tom fine tunes the language. I think we're fairly close. Maybe September even we can have a public hearing. I wouldn't want to necessarily piggyback it on the sign code.
We'll get it done right.
Very good. All right. Anything else, Tom?
Nope, thank you.
David, has Mr. Sweeney joined us?
I have sent him 2 emails, and he has not yet joined the meeting. Although I did email back with him earlier today, and he was aware of the meeting this evening. So I'm not sure if he got hung up somewhere else or what the situation may be.
Okay. Well, interrupt us if you hear from him. Otherwise, we'll pass on his, or I'll pass administratively his application to August. I don't think, David, if you could do a quick math calculation, if we run into an issue, because we're passing it for more than a month. You don't have to answer it right now off the top of your head, but we'll continue with our meeting. If you can let me know at the end, I'll appreciate it. Well, let's move on with our agenda. Next is persons wishing to address the Planning Commission on the business of the Planning Commission. Anybody here wish to address the commission? Sir, Mr. Parrish?
My name is Kevin Parrish. I'm a resident at 176 Washington in the village of Glendale. I know that you guys have already forwarded 42 Washington and conditional use to council, waiting on you to sign. But in all the discussions that I attended, I never heard you guys mention any efforts you took in observing the federal regulations for a national historic community and the buildings, structures that might go through significant change. So for the record, let me ask you guys, did you, or are you aware of the federal regulations for a national historic community such as the village of Glendale?
Sir, our regulations and our processes were drafted with those regulations, federal regulations and policies in mind. So in that sense, we have adopted and absorbed those policies into our code. And second point is the request that was before us was not strictly dealing with revisions to the physical plan. That comes when we review the appropriateness. We were talking strictly about the use of the property. So we've determined that in our recommendation that an assisted living facility is an appropriate use for that property. If it passes council, then we will address the appropriateness standards, again, which are grounded in federal
Well, the
policy.
proposals that I heard Denny give to this council was that they wanted to do some demolition of everything except the gym, which are physical changes, major changes to a national historic structure. And so that does apply And I didn't hear any conversation of the restrictions that come with that and the special conditions for which those modifications could be done. Although you voted to approve it, knowing that Mimi's house would tear down the historic house of 160 years and only leave the gym structure remaining. Have you thought about the impact that has on our status as a national historic community? Because it does have significant impact when we start tampering with things that us being a national historic village. That's just a question I'm bringing to this
Well,
council.
it
for the
sounds
record.
like a rhetorical question. If you're asking what we each thought about, we can't divulge our thoughts. I'm not going to divulge my thoughts. I'll just reiterate what I said before, that the issues that you're defining and you're discussing deal with appropriateness, and that's a different bucket of regulations from our code. Instead, before, we were looking at the criteria for a conditional use, and you're very familiar with those, traffic and effect on neighborhood and so forth. So the issues of appropriateness will be addressed if and when council
Those are
approves.
not the meetings that I attended here in this council dealing with the Eckstein School. The first time they came, they proposed to tear it down, and you guys sent them back saying you couldn't tear all of it down. And so they went back, but they didn't address that coming back. I'm just wanting to put it on the record that what I'm saying, because if it was recorded, I don't know if it was recorded in its entirety, the previous meetings, because we have some issues with the record keeping system of the village of Glendale and their release of public records. But if it was recorded, then it should be recorded on what the language was and what was discussed. So I just came before this council before you guys make other decisions that reflect on the national historic status of this village. Because I see you do a lot of investigations on other things, but it seemed like this kind of slipped through by you, that you didn't do the in-depthness that was necessary to see what that jeopardizes if you tear down that structure and leave the gym standing. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else wish to address the commission?
This is Beth Sullenberger. I'm leaving the meeting. Thank
Oh,
you.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Beth. David, any word from Mr. Ryan?
He is an attendee of the meeting. I'm going to allow him to talk here and present on his application. One moment.
Hi there, this is Ryan Sweeney.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Ryan Sweeney?
Oh,
I apologize.
for calling.
That's okay, it happens all the time.
All right. Ms. Sweeney, we've all had an opportunity to look at your application. I think it consisted of the application form and some photographs. I don't believe I've seen a plan for what you intend to do with the property by way of paving. David, was that ever made public or made part of the application?
No, the application is solely for a replacement of the existing driveway area from gravel to poured concrete. Is that correct, Ms. Sweeney?
That's correct. So there's no change to the footprint of the existing driveway.
Would not change it?
Correct, and I'll
So
add the existing. Sorry.
So everywhere we see, all right. Hey, David, everywhere we see gravel on that lot will be concrete. Is that my understanding? Is that a proper summary?
Yes, that is correct based on the application received.
Okay.
Does the applicant also, is there any inclusion of sidewalks or pathways walking from the driveway to the porch or any door on the home being replaced? Or is it
No,
just the driveway?
there is an existing gravel driveway, but that's going to be, an existing gravel walkway. That's going to be removed by me, and it's not going to be poured concrete. The only thing that's going to be replaced is going to be the driveway itself. So no walkways or anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
David, are there any issues relative to the setback of the driveway?
No, there are not. The proposed driveway falls within the permitted 5-foot setback for driveways in the historic district.
Ms. Sweeney, I'm looking at the photographs that you provided, and there's obviously the main driveway coming off of Magnolia, but there also seems to be a gravel parking pad next to that little shed or garage area. Is that also subject to pavement?
Yes, that would be paved as well. The gravel there has kind of been worn away, so it's kind of mostly dirt now. But yeah, there's a small parking pad to the right of the shed, which would also be concrete. There's also gravel under kind of a carport overhang of the shed, which you might be able to see from those photographs. It would also be poured concrete beneath there. So everything would be the same matching concrete.
Okay. David, it's difficult to see from the photograph that I'm looking at, but it appears as if that parking pad, the one next to the shed that I mentioned earlier, is very close to the property line. Is that implicated in our setbacks? Their yard goes all the way back. You don't know.
No, based on the existing driveway, nothing in the existing driveway is non-conforming with the current 5-foot setback. The driveway comes closest to the property line down at the apron, and there's about a 25-foot distance between the edge of the driveway and the property line.
Yeah.
David,
Okay,
can you just confirm that the shed that I believe is on the west side of the property, the back of the shed their property line is behind that? So that the picture we're looking at, the green grass to the north of the shed is actually their property. So you've got way more than 5 feet, right?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, you just can't see it. It's planned in the back.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Sweeney, anything else to add?
Nope, that's pretty much it. Just was debating replacing the existing gravel or replacing with concrete. And I just thought aesthetically concrete would be more pleasing. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. You may not have heard our earlier discussion about driveways in general, but there was some discussion about sloping driveways generally away from your neighbors so that you're not putting any excess water onto the neighbors. I don't know if that's a requirement of the code.
It's not, they're sloping towards their house. In fact, I was going to make the comment that they may want to think about drainage on the house side of the driveway.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, that all falls under the same category. Just be careful about drainage.
Yeah.
You don't want to affect your house and you don't want to affect your neighbors.
Right.
You know, obviously we don't have the plans that indicate the drainage plan for this paving project, but
Because if you do have a parking pad, that could potentially be a very large sheet of water. And I know that there are challenges with that in the area, so.
right.
Yeah,
always
very,
is when you
very
pave.
good advice. So I can make sure my concrete paver is sloping in the right direction and make sure we have a good drainage plan there's a nice space of ivy and green stuff between my driveway and my neighbor's driveway. So I wouldn't worry too much about the slope creating drainage problems for my neighbor. But yeah, the idea that it would drain toward my house is a good idea.
All right. Any further comments, members of the commission? Is there a motion?
Move that we accept it as drawn, well, not drawn, but as pictured.
I'll
Definitely not
second.
drawn.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Members of the commission, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Ms. Sweeney, thank you very much. You want to contact David Lumsden for next steps following our approval.
Perfect.
I
Thank you
believe
so much.
that concludes everything we've had on the agenda. Members of the commission, any further discussion or motions?
In that case, I move we adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.